for the Tyler Bertuzzi news, which is where I want to start. Tyler Bertuzzi, you and I think most people thought Taylor Hall gets traded, Bertuzzi comes in, and they chose Bertuzzi over Hall. Wasn't the case. But the more that we hear about the situation, the more that comes out about the situation, I think people's first reaction when Tyler Bertuzzi signed in Toronto for 1 year, $5.5 million, was everyone said, "Oh, that's Sweeney's fault. That's Sweeney's fault. Sweeney must be lying." But again, Greg Wyshynski tweeted, Tyler Bertuzzi's agent Todd Reynolds tells ESPN that they were seeking a long-term deal in free agency. There were some on the table, but no contending team was close to $5.5 million annually. So they pivoted to a 1 year deal on a contending team with the cap jumping next summer. Regarding the Bruins, Bertuzzi's camp wanted a long-term deal, couldn't find common ground on money. They go to market, Bruins move on to other business. By the time the pivot to a 1 year deal happened, Bruins had already committed the cap space to other players. That's on Bertuzzi and his camp. That's not, I'm not trying to play Mr. Defend the Team here, but that to me seems way more on Bertuzzi's agent and their camp than Bruins.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at it, I think, when you have a situation here where an asset you want to retain ultimately moves on, I think there's, misgivings or misreads from all parties. But yeah, I think if you're doling out blame, I think a big chunk of it has to go to Bertuzzi and his representatives in terms of misreading the market from the first place. Because let's face it, yes, it's almost like we have to, tackle this in different segments, but the Bruins ideally wanted to keep Bertuzzi. That wasn't part of the, that wasn't a question. And they didn't want to sign him to a 1 year deal, that's for sure. Now, was it a 4 year deal, 5 year deal? And honestly, I think if you're a Bruins fan and trying to find that middle ground between keeping a guy like Bertuzzi, who obviously fit in well here, he gave you an added element on the net front, worked out well with David Pastrnak. You want to keep him, but at a 5 year deal, that's great. If the Bruins announced on Saturday they signed him to 5 years, 5.5, Bruins Twitter probably doing backflips, right? In terms of you're signing him for cheaper than Taylor Hall. You have him signed long-term, but I think there's something you touched on, Evan, that you look at his injury history, his skating. It's not something you really want to lock in a 6-7 year deal for. So if you're the Bruins and you made the effort to try to sign Tyler Bertuzzi and you're like, we've got 5 years, 4 or 5 years, 5.5, 6 even, and he said no because him and his agent thought that they were going to get 6-7 on the market. Are you going to begrudge the Bruins for being like, all right, that's our best deal? We have so many roster spots to fill up. We can't just sit here and wait for you to hit the market and probably get what they thought was going to be a similar deal. I assume the Bruins, once they let Bertuzzi go and get to free agency, they thought he was going to sign a 6-7 year deal. I think what a lot of us really assumed as soon as those reports kind of first came out. So I don't think you can begrudge the Bruins for doing that, of signing him to, I think, a pretty fair deal, I think, considered in terms of giving him security, maybe not 6-7 years, 4 or 5 works out pretty well, I think, considered. And so for then, him to really, his market has really dried up. Again, really brutal market anyway, which I'm sure we'll touch on in terms of the amount of guys signing below level deals. But for him to then pivot to a 1 year deal, the Bruins, what are you supposed to do really in that situation? And yes, you can talk about, they should have freed up more cap space. They should have traded Ullmark. They should have traded Forbort, what have you, which again, I think it's more an indictment on the market where I think we've already talked about it, right?
Sign up at FanDuel.com/Boston and get in on the action with $200 in bonus bets.
If the Bruins had a team willing to take Ullmark for a first, or Ullmark was going to be a key piece in a trade for a guy like Elias Lindholm, I think the Bruins probably do it. But you look at the way the market was, right? Whether it's you're giving up Taylor Hall for 2 fringe defensemen, or the Islanders are giving up Josh Bailey and a second-round pick just for future considerations. The market is wacky right now, especially in terms of teams with cap space having all this leverage. So Bruins weren't going to be able to just craft out another $5 million in cap space right away unless you're giving up the reigning Vezina winner for a 4th or 5th round pick, which I don't think they were going to do just to fit in Bertuzzi. So it's just a rough situation all around. But yeah, if you're looking at what I think is the catalyst in terms of what has sparked now Bertuzzi signing a 1 year prove-it deal with Toronto, I think a lot of it falls in his camp for not wanting to take whatever the Bruins had originally offered, which again was probably going to be a pretty fair deal because they want him here, not just for this year, but in the years ahead.
That's exactly it. And I also think it goes back to, the fact that Bertuzzi's camp seemed to fumble this. Now granted, there is the side of like, he's going to go to Toronto. If he plays with Matthews and Marner, he's going to have a lot of points. Someone next offseason with the cap going up is going to give him a lot of money, probably more than maybe he'd make this offseason. Unless those injury things kick in, he'll be a year older. There are other parts of his game that I think might not age well. We've touched on this, previously. But I wanted Bertuzzi. You wanted Bertuzzi. Everyone wanted Bertuzzi on this team. He made sense. He was a fit. He was, he was a Bruin. At the same time, though, I do like what the Bruins did here. Don't bend over backwards. Again, if he was a center, right? If Tyler Bertuzzi was a center, it's a different story. That's a position of real need. You need that. On this team, granted, this hurts your offensive depth 100%. 100%. This hurts your offensive depth, and we'll get to some moves they made that might try to kind of, as you said, Moneyball Bruins, try to replace him in the aggregate. But I don't think this was a situation you bend over backwards for. They tried. They clearly put something on the table that was, as you said, fair and reasonable. That they said, no, I think we can get more, again, Sweeney said term and AAV. Again, if that's what we're being told that, so, I'll go off of it. And again, you don't do that over a second line left wing, which again, he provides a lot, but as we've said, his game could age badly. Like that's the thing about him. And I think, the Bruins realized that. That's why they probably weren't, according to reports, extending to, beyond 5 years. So again, it hurts that he's on Toronto. It hurts that he's there. Because again, I guarantee he's going to put up points against you this year. He's going to put up a lot of points in general, most likely. But at the same time, my guess is I don't know how much. Like Toronto was already good offensively. You and I have discussed this off air. Like they still don't have any goalie that you trust. Defensively, they just kind of sign these fringe top pairing defenders and hope that someone kind of, when the Red Sox were trying to find a starting pitch, like a number one ace, and they just kept like getting middle of the rotation guys, hoping one would pan out. That's kind of like the Leafs right now on defense, hoping someone pans out. Again, Bertuzzi makes them better up front, but I don't think they really needed to get better up front. Still, though, it hurts that he's on arrival against you.
That
hurts.
I mean, I think it's just a situation where, again, the Bruins would have loved to keep Bertuzzi. Like, it's not like they're like, all right, peace out. Like, we'll go back to the drawing board. Like, they really wanted to keep him. It's just the way the market kind of shifted there, and kind of how Bertuzzi's agent played ball kind of put him in this spot. And that's the unfortunate thing. It's just the Bruins are in a spot where they don't have a lot of leeway or patience, in terms of they weren't granted the ability of where they're missing just a piece or two where they could wait it out a little bit to get him. And people are like, oh, the Bruins opted, they had to sign Lucic first. They had to do all this stuff. It's not like the Bruins had one or two moves to make and they could have just waited to see what Bertuzzi decided to do. Like, you saw how crazy this market was. Like, they had to fill up multiple roster spots very quickly. And yes, like, you can make the case that Lucic was always going to sign here and he didn't have to sign him right at 12:01 or what have you. But I think you look at guys like Shattenkirk, who I guarantee you a team like Tampa or a team like Carolina would have loved to pick him up for $1 million. You look at a guy like Morgan Geekie, who we'll talk about, who is he going to be there on Sunday if you're not willing to sign him right then for 2 years, $2 million per year? So it's one of those things where you look at just how many roster spots the Bruins had to fill up in a short amount of time without having to go really bargain bin shopping on Sunday. If you want to wait that long, like, you're just not afforded that opportunity. Some of that is of your own doing in terms of going all in last year and being in this cap crunch in the first place, but you couldn't just wait around. It wasn't like the Bruins just decided to like go pivot in the other direction. They had to fill up these spots with the limited amount of cap space they had. Unless you really wanted to really scrape the bottom of the barrel on Sunday, you had to move on from Bertuzzi and make those moves on Saturday, even if it means shutting the door right away.
Sign up at FanDuel.com/Boston and get in on the action with $200 in bonus bets.